I have a Honda under each arm, one new and one old. And in this video, we're going to talk about our ownership experience with the classic Honda Motocompo, as well as the new Honda Motocompacto, and go through every cool feature on these two, as well as pick a winner. If you've never seen the original Honda Motocompo, this is a mini bike that Honda came out with and built from 1981 to 1983, and they sold just over 53,000 of these. This was an optional extra for a compact Honda car called the Honda City, and it was a pretty expensive option at the time, around $340. The reason that the Motocompo is as small as it is, and the reason that it folds up into this compact package, is because it was designed to go into the trunk of the Honda City and be your last mile transport, meaning that once you got near your destination, you could park your bigger car and unfold this bike to get the rest of the way there. In 2023, Honda surprised the majority of us by recreating the Motocompo as this, the Motocompacto, and it's a very different kind of thing with some similar premises. One of the key features of the Motocompo when it's all folded up is its small size. And if we're measuring to round about the furthest out point on this bike, it measures about 9.5 inches wide. By comparison, the Motocompacto folded up is more like 4 inches wide. And measuring it lengthwise, we're looking at about 46.5 inches. However, the Motocompacto is more like 29.5. And sitting here on its kickstand, the Motocompo is just over 21 inches tall. And it's a similar number here on the Motocompacto, also right around 21 inches. One major difference between the two is their weight. This Motocompo from 1983 is 99 pounds wet with all the fluids that it needs to run, whereas the Motocompacto weighs more like 41 pounds. Look, it's no surprise. If you're a bigger individual, it's gonna feel a little tight on either one of these. I'm about 5'10", 175 pounds. I can comfortably enough ride the Motocompo for as long as you're likely to ride a Motocompo for. And it's the same thing on the Motocompacto, at least as far as size goes. I've got maybe a little bit more room for my leg because the forks aren't quite as wide and the whole bike is pretty narrow, but they've got a similar rider triangle, if you want to call it that. Easily the coolest thing about our 1983 Motocompo is the styling, the beautiful bright red bodywork that you could also get in white or in bright yellow, but these very 80s looking retro graphics that say Motocompo, the fins that are here on the side to let a little air move through the bodywork, and the general shape and design of it makes this an iconic mini bike. These Motocompos were produced for the Japanese market, and as such, there's a lot of Japanese script in here, although interestingly, there is some English as well. So you can see this indication to not step there, which seems pretty obvious to me, but maybe not to everybody. Also, helmet holder. This is an interesting feature on this bike that I didn't realize at first, but if you turn this key from lock to open, you'll notice that a pin will slide in and out, and that way you can put the D-ring of your helmet in place and lock it. If you look here, it says parking lock, and you may be wondering about that. What's interesting is that this bike has hidden in it this cable that you can use theoretically to lock it up, but kind of like the helmet lock, I'm not sure how secure it is. I think a motivated enough criminal with a butter knife could probably get through it. By far my favorite bit of English script on this bike is maybe not the best translation. It says untouchable, and while that's not strictly literally true, because I can touch it and I just did, I can see what they're getting at because there are some spikes here on the bottom of the bodywork to give you an indication that this is not where you should pick up the bike from. Instead, we have 4 labeled carrying points with some spots where you can also tie the bike down. And while up top it tells you no step, they do label where you're supposed to step, if that wasn't clear. Also spelled out for you on the back of the bodywork is warning exhaust muffler. Another questionable translation, I would say. But once again, I understand what they're getting at. You don't want to touch the exhaust because it can be hot. However, I find it funny that this exhaust is about the size of a straw that you would use if you got boba tea. And finally, my favorite decal, maybe on the whole bike, although I do like Untouchable a lot, is this up decal that shows you a glass of water. And this is interesting. I've had some people suggest that this is telling you what direction to lay it down if you're going to lay the bike on its side. However, I would be wary of laying this bike on its side because it is a gas-powered bike with a carburetor that I don't really want to lay over. By comparison, Honda's brand new Motocompacto doesn't have nearly as many fun little quirks, though there are a few things. One of my favorites being the material used on the seat and on the handlebar grips. It's a nice feeling leather-like material. Also interesting is the way they styled this Motocompacto. It is very simple and very blank, and Honda's idea was that you can put your own decals on it, and I've seen people put a lot of fun liveries and logos on these bikes. The only bit of styling really along the side is this Honda logo at the top corner. One useful thing about the Motocompacto is that you do actually have a little bit of storage where the bike folds into when it's unfolded and ready to ride. For gauges, or gauge singular, the Motocompo uses this single off-center gauge that is backlit, and it's got a very cool green grid pattern that looks very 80s. It is in kilometers per hour, which makes sense for the Japanese market, and we've got an oil light as well. By comparison, the Motocompacto uses a very small digital gauge to show you your battery level, your speed, and your riding mode. The headlight on the Motocompacto is very small and LED, and right below it, you'll find the charging port. It also has a small LED tail light that lights up when you brake. By comparison, the Motocompo has an old school headlight that only operates when you're running, and it definitely gets a little bit brighter when you use the throttle, but not by much. I also love the way that the tail light and the turn signals are integrated into the back of the bodywork here on the Motocompo. And it's interesting, for some reason, seems like the turn signal hesitates at times when it's not getting a lot of power. That might just be why. The controls on the Motocompacto are very simple. You have a thumb throttle, a bell in place of a horn, and a single brake on the rear wheel. The Motocompo has controls more similar to a traditional motorcycle, so you have headlights off and then on. You have your turn signal switch there, a horn. We've got a more typical throttle assembly, and we've got front and rear brakes. Another one of the major differences between the Motocompacto and the Motocompo is the way that they're driven. This is a battery-powered electric little mini bike that is front drive, so it's just the front tire that spins to get you moving. That single brake in the rear, and Honda claims 15 miles per hour top speed and about 12 miles of range. The Motocompo makes its way down the road courtesy of a 49cc two-stroke single-cylinder air-cooled motor. It's carbureted, of course, and it's simple, it's small, it's pretty easy to keep running, but it's not a powerhouse. 2.5 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot, but the way that this bike is tuned and engineered, it makes more torque than horsepower, 2.7 pound-feet of torque. The Motocompo also has a leg up on the Motocompacto in one big way, and that is the presence of both front and rear suspension. Pretty limited travel, so I wouldn't take this on your favorite single track. And it's all very simple stuff. It's all drum brakes front and rear, but that suspension makes a big difference.
Now let's take the Motocompo for a brief ride, and I've got a little GPS speedometer app set up so that I can measure our top speed on this and have at least some consistency between how I'm measuring both of these and not depending on this old school cable operated kilometers per hour gauge, which as an American, you know. Anyway, this gauge goes up to 200 miles per hour. We'll see how much of it we end up using. We've got a big numeric readout there at the bottom, which should make it a little easier to see. So let's see, fuel on. It's kind of interesting, the Kickstarter here on the left side. But since it's already warm, it comes to life. All my electronics are active. Pretty sweet. Okay, let's see if I can get moving and get an idea of what kind of speeds I can do here on the Motocompo. 15, 18, 20, 21. So 21, at least over this light and pretty hard-packed dirt surface, seems to be about where it's maxed out at. We are about a mile above sea level here in Colorado, and I haven't actually had this carb retuned for the altitude, so it could probably do around 25 maybe if we played it with the carb tuning a little bit. It runs okay though. But in all, the Motocompo is a really fun little scooter to ride. It's got tiny wheels and it's not very stable at speed, so you feel all these bumps even with the suspension that you've got. And yeah, it's not a great handling machine, it's not a great stopping machine, it's not really designed to be an impressive performer, but it's still a blast to ride, especially being two-stroke. Wouldn't recommend really riding it over dirt that much. And yeah, it's not super quick. It takes a while to get up to speed. It takes a while for that two-stroke to do its thing and get responding. And it's a little loud when you're at full speed, which you find yourself at pretty often. So it's a little sketchy. I wouldn't put a beginner, somebody who doesn't ride at all, on this, because I both don't want it to hit the ground and it can be a little wobbly when you're moving on the swifter side of things. Still a really cool little bike though. I ride it around a lot and enjoy just feeling a little fresh breeze, cruising around the neighborhood, saying hi to some of my friends that live nearby me, and enjoying a nice day on the Motocompo. So that is super cool. But let's see what we can do here in the Motocompacto. Oh, look at that. If that stays, that would be pretty sweet. So we're switched on. I can only barely see the gauge. It's a little difficult to read. I think we're on. Maybe not. Oh, that's why it was hard to read. So I'll switch from mode 1 to mode 2, where it gives you full power and also off the rip. Because in mode 1, you have to push it to get it moving. And I can tell you that the Motocompacto does not like the dirt here. But we're getting going. Oh, so it's not usually this bad, but we've got no suspension, like I said. And if you're on even just a bumpy asphalt road, it's bumpy. Now we're doing 16 indicated, so a little over the top speed that's claimed. But about as fast as you want to go on this, because similar to the Motocompo, this Motocompacto it's not designed to be stable at speed. So even at 15, 16 miles per hour, you feel pretty good about that being the top speed, and you're not needing much else.
Of course, there are better environments for a Motocompacto than a dirt parking lot, like, for example, the little autocross style course that Honda set up for us on the launch of the Motocompacto, where we were able to race around as a group of people and have a lot of fun on these little bikes. I also want to say a quick thanks to Scott and the team over at Rider Justice, because if you're planning on riding some little bikes on the road, but also especially some bigger bikes, then you definitely want to have Scott and the team over at Rider Justice on your side. If you ever need legal representation, if you're ever in an incident, either on 2 wheels or 4, Scott is the person to talk to, so make sure you call Scott first. Now, for the verdict on these two bikes, I think it's obvious. The Motocompo is cooler than the new Motocompacto. And this would go much longer way in my mind if it wasn't about $1,000, $995. Seems like a lot of money for something that doesn't have suspension, doesn't go very fast, and doesn't go very far. So I don't think this is the best deal in the world. However, I love the fact that Honda reimagined the Motocompo, which I hold very near and dear, and tried to make it into something new. As for the old school Motocompo, the price reflects how cool some people, myself included, think it is. I stand by that. This, for me, was a dream bike, as silly as that sounds. Very, very exciting to me. So I paid about $3,500 for this Motocompo. And as far as the Motocompo market goes, it's actually not bad if you can believe it. These can sell for around $5,000 or $6,000. So this is very expensive for a scooter. You can 100% find a way, way better deal. But this Motocompo is a unique little piece of motorcycle history, something that a lot of people recognize, and people get a huge kick out of it. I really enjoy bringing this over to motorcycle shows, seeing it in my garage, riding it around the neighborhood. I actually get a chance to throw a leg over it pretty frequently, so I love it. But let me know in the comments below, which of these two makes more sense or maybe makes less not sense, if that makes sense. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.